Namaskar viewers, hello and welcome to Sunset TV. I am Tina Jha, you're watching Perspective. The first National Conference of Parliamentary and Legislative Committees on Women Empowerment concluded in Tirupati on Monday with the adoption of the Tirupati Resolution, laying down a clear roadmap for advancing women empowerment. The resolution emphasized applying a gender lens across all ministries and departments, enhancing allocations for health, education, skills and entrepreneurship, institutionalizing gender-responsive budgeting and strengthening technical capacity both at the national and state levels. It committed to bridging the digital divide, promoting women's participation in STEM fields, ensuring cyber safety, expanding digital literacy programs, and making women active creators of technology. Reaffirming the centrality of women-led development, which was the central theme of the conference, the resolution pledged to advance women's education, health, safety, dignity and self-reliance as the cornerstone of national progress and the realization of Viksit Bharat by 2047. Lok Sabha Speaker Om Birla highlighted the need for sustainable economic empowerment models for women. He said, women's empowerment is not only a social imperative, but also an economic necessity today. By investing in women's health, education, skills and entrepreneurship, India can unlock a vast reservoir of human capital and build a resilient socio-economic model of development. He emphasized that women's empowerment must not be viewed only as a matter of welfare, but as the foundation of national development.
जब हम आर्थिक स्वावलंबन होंगे, सामाजिक हमारी आत्मनिर्भर होगी, तकनीकी रूप से हम समृद्ध होंगे तो विकसित भारत के कदम की ओर बढ़ाएंगे। इसलिए महिला नेतृत्व आज देश के अंदर नई दिशा, नया दृष्टिकोण दे रहा है। केवल महिला नेतृत्व दृष्टिकोण नहीं दे रहा, हमारी आर्थिक सामाजिक क्षेत्र के अंदर बदलाव में विशेष भूमिका निभा रहा है। और मुझे खुशी है कि आज आपने भी समय को परिवर्तन देखा है। कोई समय था जब गांव की बेटी गांव में रहकर शादी हो जाती थी। आज गांव की बेटी देश और प्रदेश और दुनिया के अंदर नेतृत्व कर रही है। ये बदलाव हमने हमारी आंखों से देखा है, लेकिन हमारा सपना बड़ा, हमारा लक्ष्य बड़ा है, हमारा विचार दृष्टिकोण बड़ा है। हमें बहुत दिनों तक इंतजार नहीं करना, हमें तेजी से काम करना है, हमें संकल्पित होकर काम करना है और जल्दी उन लक्ष्यों और संकल्पों को पहुंचाना है, क्योंकि देश और प्रदेश ने हमें नेतृत्व दिया है और इसलिए हमारी जिम्मेदारी बन जाती है कि जो नेतृत्व की क्षमता में दी है उसका लाभ समाज की अंतिम महिला को मिले, यही हमारा संकल्प होना चाहिए।
The two-day national conference, the first ever of the Committees on Empowerment of Women, Parliament and state and UT legislatures, was held on the theme Women-led Development for Viksit Bharat, with a special focus on gender-responsive budgeting and empowering women to face challenges of emerging technologies. The deliberations centered on strengthening women's leadership, enhancing participation in governance, ensuring inclusive policies, and advancing the vision of an India where women are not only beneficiaries but also principal architects of national development. To talk about these critical discussions and the outcomes reflected in the Tirupati resolution, we are joined by two distinguished guests. I'm pleased to welcome on the program Dr. Mrs. Pankaj Mittal, Secretary General of the Association of Indian Universities, and Dr. Yamini Agarwal, Professor, Indian Institute of Finance. Thank you to both my guests. Welcome to the program. So, Dr. Mittal, let's have the first question from you, and especially related to the Tirupati resolution, which emphasized that applying a gender lens across all ministries and departments calls for enhancing allocations for health, education, skills and entrepreneurship. Also institutionalizing gender-responsive budgeting and strengthening technical capacity both at the national and state levels. Why do you think this emphasis is significant now? And how will it change the way policies are designed and funded in the country?
Thank you very much for that and for having me here. Incidentally, the same topic, women-led development for Viksit Bharat, we had a women vice chancellors conference last month only in Bhimtal. So there we discussed threadbare on this topic, women-led development for Viksit Bharat, and it was mentioned that rather we could see that the universities which are led by women, incidentally, we have around 19 universities out of 1,300 universities, around 10%, which are led by women vice chancellors. So if you see the data, I am from the education field, so I can tell you about the data. So if you see the students between male and female, the students are almost 50-50. The assistant professors, we have around 46% women. For the associate professor, it is around 37% women. When you come to professors, it is around 26% women. But when you come to vice chancellors, it is around 10% women. And this 10% is also only in this conference. 2 years back, we thought when we held the first women conference, women VCs conference, this number was only 7%. So 7% to 10.3% or something like that is itself a big jump. So now the government is looking towards women leadership, and we have seen that the universities which are led by women are more empathic, they are doing much better work, they are more systematic, and they are on the road to success. But yes, we do need gender budgeting, we need more facilities, we need more laws which are favorable to women, we need more of, say, gender I should not say, we need more of gender justice to the women. So that is somewhere missing. So there are many, we were talking in that conference, in small things we do gender bias. For example, I mean, this looks very small, but when you see the height of the podium on a stage, the height of the podium is adjusted as per men. So women, when they stand there, they are barely visible. So small things, even when you go to the, say, trains and all, the height of the luggage compartment is adjusted as per men. So small things, even if we see, there is a gender bias in that. Yeah. So that gender bias has to be removed. And if that gender bias is removed, I'm sure the women will do much more. They are doing very good, but they can be doing much more in all the fields, leave apart education, any field. And we have seen in the companies also, the women-led companies are doing much better. Women are task managers, they can do multitasking, and they can be much better managers, and people listen to them. So it is important that we should work for women-led development, and that will lead us to Viksit Bharat.
You're right, and this is something that Lok Sabha Speaker Om Birla also reiterated on how women are a central pillar of our Viksit Bharat vision, and without mainstreaming their concerns into all of policy areas, perhaps we will not be able to reach the goal. So by institutionalizing gender-responsive budgeting, there are larger socio-economic objectives that the resolution has also sought to achieve. Dr. Agarwal, your perspective on the fact that gender-responsive budgeting, which was one of the sub-themes of the two-day conference held in Tirupati, it's being described as an instrument of social justice. In your view, what is the kind of deeper societal change that this is aiming to bring about?
Well, I think it's a very good initiative by the government, and a lot has been done for women, and a lot needs to be done. When you look at some of the initiatives like Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, there has been an increase in the number of females from 918 to 930. There has been an increase in gross enrollment ratios from 75% to 78% in secondary schools. There has been a decrease in the maternity mortality rates from 130 lakh live births to 90 lakh live births. That has been there. There have been missions that have been brought about by the government on a constant basis to bring about gender justice and close the gender gap, whether it is in the form of Nari Adalats, whether it is in the form of Sakhi Niwas, which is a secure accommodation, Sukanya Samriddhi Yojana, Lakpati Didi scheme, Drone Didi scheme, Mission Indradhanush, Pradhan Mantri Matsya Yojana, TREDS, Ujjwala Yojana, and many more, or even PM Awas Yojana, or the Women Helpline for the safety that is there. The STEP initiative for the training of the women, and the Mahila Samman saving schemes that are there. When we look at all these schemes and we talk about gender responsiveness to and the institutionalization factors, we do understand that 5 key factors play an important role in women's development today. One is to provide resources for them. That is to ensure wherever they are undervalued in health, education, or any other specific sources, even in small and medium enterprises, they are given their rights by at least funding them. It is estimated about 1.7 trillion of less amount of investment goes to women, which if provided to women can increase 12% annual incomes of women across the world. Second, it is also found that 43.7% of the women lack decision making. And even in many of the low developed economies, about 90% women don't get the rights to decision making across many of the spheres of the economy, social, cultural, or various other aspects. It's important that women get more freedom of work, which is very important. And that is why institutionalizing these schemes in gender responsiveness of all these schemes that the government brings is very important, which means people get equal pay, they get access to care services, which can increase 20% of the GDP by closing the gender gaps. It's also found that 2.5% more time is spent by women on unpaid care work across globally. And it is not provided for by the schemes or the institutional structures that are there. And hence, it is important that they are provided with necessary healthcare services or other services to also take care of unpaid care work, which can actually increase 10.8 trillion of their contribution in the world, which is approximately 3 times of even the tech industry today.
Right.
Decent work programs by the institutions can further make up to 300 million jobs across the world. Another important good initiative which the government has done is the Helpline 181, which is for taking care of any violence that is against women, one-stop centers that are there, which also means that there is a calling for security. Globally, it is believed that there is a global cost of 1.5 trillion or 2% global domestic product cost to the security of women, which safeguards their rights to equality, justice, and every possible framework that is necessary. And lastly is the protecting of rights as is there. And every responsiveness of the budget, every rupee spent on it will protect the rights of the women by not only providing them access to institutional frameworks that exist today, but would also provide them an access to their own livelihoods in the manner in which they can make their choices.
Certainly. So there's been a genuine significant shift from women's development to now women-led development. We want the women to become drivers of our journey towards becoming Viksit Bharat by 2047. There's a stated goal of 70% women workforce participation by 2047. So what more policy instruments or reforms will be needed? We'll discuss that. There are also some gaps that we need to fill. But one that perhaps this two-day conference at Tirupati sought to speak about is bridging the digital divide and bringing more women into STEM. Dr. Mittal, what does this tell you about the government's long-term vision for women's role in the knowledge economy? So Dr. Agarwal did point out consistent efforts over the last decade or so to improve the status of women, to empower women in not just the urban areas, but in the rural setup as well. But when we want 70% women in the workforce, a lot needs to be done, isn't it?
So you're right that we need to empower women not only through STEM education, but basically through digital economy, through AI, through robotics, and through new age technologies for realizing the goals of, say, SDG 4 or Viksit Bharat. And when you talk of AI and when you talk of data, there's a difference. I mean, when you talk of, say, use of AI, the women, 33% of the women use AI as compared to 77% of the men. So that is a difference. And there are many initiatives by the government of India. For example, there's a scheme called AI Kiran, which aims to integrate women from all segments into the mainstream knowledge of AI. And it is intending to mitigate existing inequalities in their lives. So there are many schemes, and there are many trailblazers, I should say. For example, there is one Priyanka Kamath, who is the co-founder and CEO of 100 Giga. She's designing to encourage young women to explore and excel in AI. There's one girl called Ritika Chaudhary. She is the CEO of Unscript AI, who has been instrumental in leveraging digital platforms to enhance women's visibility in entrepreneurship. And there is one Kosambi Manjita. She is also the CEO of Mason, and she is having an innovative approach in tech and has opened pathways for women in traditionally male-dominated industries. So there are many ways in which the government is trying to enable women to use the AI and digital tools to enhance their capability, to enhance women's empowerment. And there are many other ways in which we can be encouraging the women. So when we held this conference, which I was talking about, there were many recommendations. For example, the conference advocated for partnership between educational institutions and tech companies to create mentorship programs that equipped women with essential digital skills. Because unless we have these type of collaborations, it is very difficult to do it only at the university level. Then it was mentioned that we should develop comprehensive training programs which focus on AI and emerging technologies, specially designed for women, ensuring accessibility across various socio-economic segments. Then there was a talk about organizing networking events and conferences that facilitate connections among women in technology, allowing them to share their knowledge, experiences, and resources, and also to encourage educational institutions to integrate technology-focused curricula that promote digital literacy and independent learning among female students from an early age. So there were many such recommendations, and it was made abundantly clear that unless women are technically sound, unless we have more women, incidentally, India has more women in STEM than many developed countries.
You're right.
So unless we have more women which are technically oriented, which are technically educated, we cannot be thinking of sort of raising the standard or empowering the women, especially the rural women, who feel very empowered when they use the ATM cards, who feel very important when they use the UPI, when they see the power in their hand, that just by the click of the button they can transfer money and they have a total controls on their own money. So all these things, I think, will help the women in increasing awareness and also to empower them to really lead to Viksit Bharat.
Okay, so let me also get in Dr. Agarwal's perspective on this, because there are several success stories, many inspirational stories on how women are performing in the area of emerging technologies, but that needs to be replicated at a mass scale. It needs to percolate at the lowest level of society as well. So Dr. Agarwal, 2 points emerging from what Dr. Mittal said, but also what was emphasized at the mission. One is about dedicated digital literacy missions for women. This is the proposal that came from the Lok Sabha Speaker himself. He spoke about how we need to do it on a nationwide campaign sort of a thing. And the second part that I want to understand from you is, when we talk about encouraging or say increasing the number of women in STEM fields, how can the universities or the technical institutions proactively attract and retain? That's the word in India, because we see that at the education level they're all there, but they don't translate into the workforce as well. So not just attract, but also retain women in STEM, especially from the underprivileged backgrounds.
Well, I think, when you speak of STEM, I remember Shakuntala Devi, the human computer that
Yes.
India had. And that's how the name resonates when it comes to STEM for women in India. A lot of times we do understand that the enrollments in engineering courses or in mathematical courses or in technical courses is not as much as we expect them to be. A lot of reasons are there for them. One, there is a lot of resource that is required for women to be trained to get into the competitive exams that do ask for the merits that are needed for selections in these courses. Also, there is also a need to understand that women orientation across many of the families is not the similar as that of the men. If a family with limited resources has a boy child and a girl child, they would send the boy child to a better school than a woman, because they understand that he would be the earning member, and the girl would be sent off as for a or would be married off, or to take care of the household chores. So that kind of an attitude does make a difference in terms of the selection of the women to the choices of STEM courses that are there. Also, there's been a lot of change in the urban areas, whereby the enrollments of the women have increased in STEM courses, and many of the courses where there is cerebral required by women to go ahead and move forward in their lives. But unfortunately, as I said, unpaid work or a lot of household work continues to remain a prime responsibility by women, and is not as shared a companionship as that is seen across in Western societies as across in India. And thereby, we don't see many enrollments. Also, as I said, the money factor, the resources that are required, one, both for training the women, and second, the cost of the courses that are there. They are expensive when it comes between a male and a female limited resource set from a family. Another set is also a lot of times women are not encouraged to participate in STEM courses as against that of men, because a lot of times people say this is not a woman's job, or this is not meant for a woman, and thereby that encouragement is not seen. Another important aspect which stops many women to go in many of the male-centered jobs or male-centric technology systems is because there are few that are there, and they don't want to be a few out there being representative of their groups in that particular area.
In fact, Dr. Agarwal, each time I speak about how women in India study in these fields, but they drop out, they don't pursue or advance their careers further. And I'm shocked by the numbers, because data as recently as August this year says nearly 40% of students enrolled in STEM higher education in India are women. But when it comes to the workforce, women account for only 14% of STEM professionals. So as Dr. Agarwal said, there are various reasons why this is happening. Over the last few years, we've seen there are various schemes and budgets to also overturn this. There have been changes in social norms as well, which were earlier limiting women's participation. But still, it's not to the level that we want it to be, in order for women to become the active drivers or active agents of change, which will lead us to our 2047 goal. Dr. Mittal, from your experience, and I'm sure you were speaking about a conference that you had earlier, you must have spoken about the interventions that will break these barriers most effectively. If you could also share that with us and our viewers, and especially the young women who are watching our program.
So that is very true that women, although I was telling you about the numbers that we are very good at the say student level, rather GER for women is right now 0.2% higher than the GER for the men. And but when you talk of leadership positions, like we have still to see the women Chief Justice of India. The number of parliamentarians is something like 13-14%. And that is despite the fact that if you see the winning ratio of the contesting women and men, the winning ratio of women is much better, but still the number of people or the number of women who are allowed to contest the elections is very low. So everywhere you will see that women are put to a disadvantage. And in my opinion, the reason are three. One is stereotyping, one is attitude, and third is glass ceiling. By stereotyping, I mean that today, suppose you close your eyes and think of an engineer or a doctor or a pilot, what face comes in front of you? A male face. In spite of the fact that India has maximum number of women pilots in the world, but a male face comes in front of us. But as soon as you close your eyes and think of a nurse or a receptionist, a woman face comes in front of you. Why? Because it is felt that women are meant for lower jobs and men are meant for higher jobs. Not only in India, I will tell you that I was working as the Vice Chancellor of a women university in Haryana. There a group of women Vice Chancellors came from a country like USA, and then they told us that in a country like USA, which is considered as a developed country, the women vice chancellors get less salary than the men vice chancellor. So I was almost shocked. I said, how is that possible? And then they told that in USA, salary is not fixed, it is negotiated over the table, and women tend to negotiate lower. Means they don't think that they are worth that much. So that's why I'm saying stereotyping and attitude of not only the society towards the women, but of women towards herself. She feels we are not meant for big jobs, we are not meant for higher salary. So that is one of the main issues which leads
I'm
to the
glad
glass
you
ceiling.
brought that out, because one thing that struck me when I was doing my research is when you compare India to a lot of these first world countries, you mentioned the United States, they are still to have the first president, the first prime minister. On that front, at least, we are faring much better. We've had women presidents, women prime ministers, women governors, women chief ministers. I'm sure very soon we will have the first woman chief justice of India as well. But coming back to the discussion on women more prominently taking leadership positions across different fields, Dr. Agarwal, when we say women as principal architects of national development, this is something we've heard the Prime Minister often speak about. That is what has shifted our national policy from women's empowerment to now women-led development. What changes in higher education training would create a stronger pipeline of women leaders in public life, in entrepreneurship, when we are saying women moving from beneficiaries to women creators? What more changes would you think is the need of the hour to take us there, to our 2047 goal?
Well, I'm glad that women are recognized as the principal architects. They've always been one. The raising of a child is building of the nation. And most women do that more beautifully than anybody else.
Yes.
And as mothers, we recognize our country as the motherland. And that is what we remember of a woman when it comes to them. So they are the principal architects of any nation, any organization, or any family. And that is what I believe is their strengths in terms of their commitment, dedication, and hard work. What reduces their potential to participate in the workforce is definitely one important cause is safety, security, and the sharing of the household responsibilities with that of the men. Another important aspect is resources, which are also provided to them in equality with that of the men in sharing their dreams of what they want in their future, and not limiting them to what is believed as a secured future in marriages by many of the country's people at times in the social norms given to them. But I must say that in many of the urban areas, this is fast changing, where women with their education, parents, fathers, brothers, even husbands have been fostering the way of women to higher levels wherever they have needed help. So it has been a social change that has come a long way in respecting women at various leadership positions that is bringing about a greater change in the overall social norms.
You're right, and that's why I asked for a change in the education sector. You very rightly said, because education is the bedrock of any kind of change, of the kind of leadership vision that we want to see for ourselves and for women across the country. Time allows me to take up only that much on the program. Thank you once again, Dr. Mittal, Dr. Agarwal, for joining us with your valuable insights. And to you viewers, thank you very much for your time as well.
To watch more programs of Sansad TV, subscribe to our YouTube channel and don't forget to like and share them.